Hi everyone. Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. There so much information. My head, I was 3 weeks. I wanted to go to the Woodstock because I grew up near Woodstock, but my mom wouldn't let me go. I was too young. So when I heard there was one in the valley, I was like, ooh. Unfortunately, it was at the same time as the AI engineering World's Fair. So I was there for 3 days. Got more and more information. The bottom line is that I think most people already know this. Everything, for the most part, using these tools is iteration and experimentation. There was an emphasis there on enterprise, of course, business. People want measurement. They want to know how to evaluate. They want to know how to monitor. But the interesting thing that's happening, I know some of you had heard of mixture of experts not too long ago when we were dealing with large language models. And then within the past couple of weeks, we now have a mixture of agents, which is taking the same principle. But I threw together this little presso here, so I'll share that and we'll see how that goes. Let's see. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so what you should know is I'm not an expert. I'm just a researcher. I just go where the information leads me. So when we talk about these agent frameworks, one of the other lessons I'm picking up is that none of this stuff is new. It's the same thing with the LLMs. It's not new. I jumped into this probably 18 months ago as a full stack engineer. And now I have colleagues that are across the spectrum in terms of machine learning and training models, and I wasn't really sure where I fit in. But when it comes to these agent frameworks, it's basically, taking these models and assigning them a role and giving them some tasks. So as I go through this, let's see how this. So we want to know what an agent is. And they're saying that, and again, I apologize if you already know this stuff. I'm just doing a basic overview. But it's an autonomous AI unit. It has specific tasks. It makes decisions, and it communicates with the other agents. And I always would get confused because I came in like many of my colleagues through OpenAI, Chat GPT. That was the beginning for me. That was like, oh my God, I dropped everything and started AI research. But I had a hard time understanding what the difference was between custom GPTs and OpenAI assistants and then agents. And I think folks are getting, a little confused about what they are. There's right now, agents and agentic systems are all the rage. Everybody's talking about it, but not that many people are actually doing it in production in a way that is effective at this point. That seemed to be, what folks were talking about at the conference. So in essence, what these agents do, you give them a purpose, you give them access to some tools. They make decisions based on the query, which tools they should use. They'll send the context off to the tool. I looked at how that information went across. It's generally a JSON file, and it just says, here's the tool to use, and here's the data to spark with this tool. I do have some links in here I put in. If anyone wants to check it out, I will. For example, this one here. This is a good guide on. It says prompt engineering. But when we click on it, it tells you everything you need to know about agents. This is a prompting guide. I found this was helpful. There's also, if you have the opportunity to stop by MongoDB. MongoDB has a whole section on agents that they talk about. And you'll see a lot of these illustrations. but this is one of the better ones that I've seen. You have to have the planning. You'll see when we were doing, what was it, chain of thought. It's kind of like chain of thought, the planning. It needs to know, what the step-by-step course it should take. You need to have memory, you need to have, and we're not just talking about context, but I've seen that was a big thing. There were a lot of discussions. I hung out with the guys from Crew AI, and there was a lot of discussion of how they're going to be implementing more memory, both long-term and short-term memory. I think I have a link here for Crew as well. And then you have you need tools, and tools are more or less just functions. You give it the data, you have it, take some action on it. You'll hear a lot about the React, which is reasoning and action. That's how these agents work. So generally speaking, you have a framework, you have a user request, you have the agent or the brain, that's the LLM, you have the planning, which assists it, and then you have the memory, which keeps track of past behaviors. There was some discussion at lunch times. It was really interesting how people want to approach this memory thing. One startup I was talking to, they were basically using graphs for the memory. They would just put it in this graph and then save that graph and then feed it back to the LLM, and that was its memory. Little bit, it was a little bit over my head, but it sounded interesting. So if you get a chance, just hit this link on prompt engineering, and you can see they have the different types of reasoning. They have the multi-path reasoning, single path reasoning. Overall, I mentioned this, the React, which is, this shows you how it will go through, and individual LLMs will process this information. So yeah, that's fun. You can always hit back there. Let's see what else we got. I mentioned praising AI, I think a few weeks ago or maybe last month. This guy has put together this framework where you can leverage either AutoGen and Crew AI, and they're supposedly adding capability for more open source models. But it's really nice because it's just a wrapper that you put on here, and you initiate it, with your first prompt, and then there's other commands you can pass. You can either pass AutoGen or Crew AI or whatever the other model is that they're going to set up for this. I found praising, I had gone through Crew first, and Crew's really seems really rather simple to get an agent network up very quickly. And praising seemed as well. It's not low code, but it kind of feels like it. On the opposite end of the spectrum, AutoGen I found was really kind of confusing. I almost stepped away from it. Let's see if it comes in here. And I did some comparisons too. So AutoGen works with modular blocks. It's supposed to be plug and play. AutoGen is going to be more for enterprise, I believe, because it's got, it's got the not the framework, but the infrastructure for it, where you can, it's Microsoft, right? So you can just go in and do your inference on your models, and you can do your training, your fine tuning, and everything you want, and then just utilize those within the Microsoft ecosystem. So yeah, that's but I found it a little complicated. It has multimodal capabilities, which is very important. It's customizable and scalable. Scalability is big with AutoGen. And supposedly it has a seamless integration with Azure. So again, like I said, if you're thinking business and you're thinking enterprise, AutoGen probably would be the way to go. You could prototype, you can do proof of concept with something like Crew and praising. And then once you get a feel for what it is you want to do and you're more specific, then you can step off to something like AutoGen. I really liked Crew. I mean, I fell in love with this. It was very simple. It's built on top of LangChain. LangChain itself is just a matter of chaining, a process together. Um, the Crew AI it just felt really comfortable, and I have a link to it, although it appears that it's not working there. Interesting. Okay, my apologies. Let's see. What concepts, agents, right? So again, the definition of agents seems to be synonymous across, most of the frameworks. It performs tasks, it makes decisions, and it communicates with other agents. The only thing this one's missing is the memory component. And they are working on that. And then it gives you all the attributes that you can pass in. You pass in a backstory, a role, a goal, and then you can choose, which tools it has access to, which, the function calling, and also the LLM and it's pretty clean. You have your prompt templates. You have this is an example of setting up your agents and your tools. So this would be Google Serper. That's kind of like a web scraper. You have your agent one, your task for that agent, and then agent two and the task for that. Then you essentially build your crew and then kick it off, and off it goes. You can send in your prompts. It's pretty cool. I like it a lot. I'm a fan of Crew. But there has been, there's not everybody's that happy with it. So this is a side by side, and when I put it side by side, I don't see that strong of a difference. This says flexible patterns. This is task oriented. Safety features. This is output spec. You can tell it exactly what you want to come out of it. Some of the issues that they have with these, and oh, if you're playing with agents, and this goes for if you're playing around with the LLMs, I do a lot of stuff in Google Colab it's basically a Python a Jupyter notebook, Google Colab. But if you're doing that, or if you're working locally in Llama, and I find that when I'm working with all these different models, I'm constantly like keeping track of my API keys. And so Google Colab's really great because you can put all your API keys for everything right there, and it saves it. And that's convenient. And then you can reference it from your notebook. But I found that in cases where I was working locally, like with Llama, and I put my keys in my environment file, and I wasn't really paying particular attention to what I was playing with, I looked at my bank account and I started seeing all these debits coming out, and I was like, what's going on? And the thing is that with OpenAI, you really have to be, if you're like me and I'm going from computer to computer and API to API, I really had to be cognizant of like what keys I was using and which ones I left. I ended up spending money that I didn't need to. So word of advice, if you're playing with these agents, keep track of your API keys. Don't check them into GitHub, and pay attention to the OpenAI or whichever model you're using. Pay attention to the information that tells you the usage and how much it's costing you, because it will sneak up on you. That's just an aside, but I learned the hard way. So this is what some folks are saying, that, we're coming up with all these frameworks, and I was kind of, I'm enjoying them because I recognize that we're at the beginning, right? A lot of these are going to go away. Everybody's playing with this one and that one. And at some point, we'll most likely have one or two that everyone uses, right? But there are some, right now, when I think about the different frameworks, Llama Index just released Llama Index agents this week, I think it was. I heard about it at the conference, so I'm still digging into that one. I'm finding that there's other ones that are coming out of the woodwork, and I have, a list that I'm sticking in my Notion to check them out. But for the most part, they're starting to be, just from the developer's point of view, there's starting to be a little pushback. I noticed in Discord, and Slack, folks are saying like, okay, I've tried this one, I've tried that one, this one's too slow. This one doesn't have access to these functions. And there's a little tiny bit of frustration. And as a full stack developer, it reminds me of, the front end frameworks. We had React, we had Vue, we have Angular, Backbone, Ember, YUI, and it just seems like you had to keep switching, you had to keep changing. And once you started working with one, you were more or less locked into that with your developers and your teams. So I wouldn't put huge investment into agents right now because I don't see stability. I see a lot of, folks, trying this and trying that. And as I stated earlier, there's and also a larger push for observability. People want to know, just like with the language models, they want to be able to determine whether or not this model is giving them, exactly what they need, how truthful is it, and so on. And so they're doing the same thing with the agents. And so, yeah, there's some people that are saying they're too complex. There's one guy that said that it's simpler to just focus on the data, the data in the sequential flow of input and processing. In other words, the pipeline. There's many companies right now going to be vying for that role of having the whole pipeline, having the whole environment where you just go there, you do everything, you do your training. I think there's Together AI. I think there's just so many of them. And like I said, I have a list that I'm having difficulty keeping track of them all. But they are very helpful because you don't have to jump around. So yeah, it's a matter of being able to tailor your solutions and then balance that complexity. Let's see what else all right. So here's some components. I had mentioned the React Reason and Act. The LLM generates reasoning traces. I was thinking of this as nodes and what is it between the nodes and
Edges.
edges, that's it, nodes and edges. And that's essentially what they were saying. If you look at these agents like that, each agent is a node, and then the edges are the function calls or the function calls. So yeah, you have your chain of thought, goes through step-by-step reasoning, and then it reasons, takes specific actions based on that reasoning, and then it reflects on it, comes back. And these are, in some cases you might have one or more than one, but in some cases you have 2 to 3 agents. It's pretty simple, it's linear. In other cases, you may have many. You may have a manager agent that then delegates to the various ones depending on what access they have to the tools. Yeah, so this one was important for me. I had mentioned earlier, I didn't, I was getting confused with GPTs and assistants and then agents. So yeah, it's saying, GPTs don't really require any coding. Folks can go right to OpenAI and basically create their custom GPT. They're good for specific jobs, but they're limited in scope. And then the assistants, they're a little bit better. They're API based, integration focused, and they maintain stateful conversation. So with a custom GPT, you give it a query, it gives you an answer. Query, answer, right? Whereas with the assistants, there is more going on there. You can coax it. You can have go back and forth. It has more of a conversation. And then agents, they're highly customizable. They have the ability for collaboration. And essentially, you have a team of specialized agents at your beck and call. I mean, it just sounds wonderful, right? I think we covered this one. Oh, no, yeah. All right, so this is when to use it. So, and it makes sense. Tackling complex multi-step tasks diverse capabilities, question answering analysis. So, these are the big boys, right? And that you should see like some of the models like they're leaning towards is really surprising. Let me see. So simple tasks, you can just use an LLM. If you need a little bit more specific data, you do RAG. You've heard all about RAG. I think RAG is they're using combinations of RAG now. They're using what do they call it? Hybrid RAG. They're using hybrid search with RAG and with DSPy and also RAG. So there's another one. There's something else that's going. Oh yeah, graphs. Yeah, knowledge graphs, which they're getting really good results with LLMs with knowledge graphs. So then I threw something in here on mixture of agents, which is, these are the collaborating agents. It's a modular architecture. It's easier for updating and scaling. And it's an ensemble, essentially, and it combines tasks, agents for efficiency. You can use different ones, right? So we have models now that are multimodal, so you can, kind of build your own team for whatever you want. And I have, I did put a link here for mixture of agents paper where, they talk about how they came up with the idea and the evals that they're getting. This is the structure. You have these layers, and 3 agents, 1, 2, 3, and then they come here and then have an output, go to the next one, have an output, go to the next one, have an output, and this guy, judges that. It's interesting. I don't know. It's interesting to me. And so I love to share this stuff. So yeah, this is basically a lot of the stuff that I'm doing is one-off. I'm working with independents, small mom and pops, entrepreneurs. But I see this really taking off at the enterprise level. I mean, there's already I'm seeing jobs that are going to be disappearing because there's really not going to be a need for a person to be there and to handle this stuff. So before you go, like I said, I wouldn't be investing a whole lot of money in agents right now, until everything washes out and we figure out who's going to be, which frameworks are going to be best for which use cases. But bottom line is assess your needs, before you dive in, and evaluate the ease of use, which is I think why I prefer Crew over AutoGen. Consider the integration capabilities. This is very important. I saw a video where someone was talking about, when you decide to utilize this technology, you definitely have to consider where you are at currently, how clean your data is, what kind of database are you using? Are you using NoSQL? Are you using, a traditional database? Are you using vector? How's all that coming together? How clean is your data? How annotated is your data? All the data stuff. You need data scientists to be able to really, use that stuff. And I'm seeing that, there's many companies chomping at the bit to really get into this space. And there's been some discussion even at the conference where it's like these companies really don't know what they need. They don't have clarity on what they need. They know they want to do something, and it reminds me of the internet, the beginning of the internet, where there were many businesses. There was that FOMO. It was like, I need a website. Well, what do you want? What kind of well, I want a website like that website. Well, that website was designed to solve that company's problem. So that's not the website for you, right? It's the same thing here. Everybody wants to get their hands on it, and they want to be able to say that, we're using AI. And I think so far, chatbots are the joy in that, right? Everybody can have a chatbot. That's easy. It's no great shakes, but when it comes to really implementing an LLM application and into your pipeline, into your into your organization, Yeah, I feel like you have to be careful and you have to consider what you already have in place. If you're a Microsoft shop, I'd go with AutoGen. If you're, a different shop, if you're open source, I'd look at open source models, and look at open source agent frameworks. Okay. So yeah, again, same thing with LLMs, test drive, iterate, play around, try to break it. That's what I do. These are some of the trends that we're seeing. Enhanced multimodal capabilities. You guys already know most of this. Most of you probably already know this. Quantum enhanced AI collaboration. They're talking about quantum algorithms. So AI agents having a superpowered energy drink, I guess. There were some people I was talking with, there were some young guys there, and they said to me, you were here at the beginning of the internet. Did you guys ever consider the ethical outcomes
Mhm.
or anything? And I told them no. I mean, but I was a web guy, I mean, when I started in 95, I worked for a large agency, interactive agency, and we were just, on the edge, building out whatever we could for these large companies. And when it came to doing like ads, it was like, oh, the banner ad. And then it was the banner ad, one banner ad. And then it was a banner ad in the header, and then it was a banner ad in the footer. Then there was a banner ad in the nav. Then banner ads were kind of like not enough eyeballs. So let's animate it. So then we had animated banner ads. And then we had GIFs, And then we had Flash. And it was all about keeping the attention of people. And fast forward to 2008, 2009, now you've got, Facebook and Twitter, and you've got infinite scroll. And just now we're seeing the results, the damage that is been done by, the social networks and the marketing and the stuff where it was like attention. We were giving our attention and we were giving our data for what? What do we get in return? Well, we get to shop, we get to communicate, that's all good. But at the beginning of building those websites, I don't recall us ever considering like anything negative. I don't recall us saying, oh, this might be a bad idea. I don't remember that. So they are thinking about that now. They
Raymond,
are.
yeah, I just want to jump in. We'll make sure we get time for questions in the open mic. So
Okay, certainly. So yeah, and then the other thing is seamless human AI collaboration. With these agents, humans are going to need to be in the loop. That there's no way around that. They're not they're and I don't see that changing for a couple of years. I just don't. So here's some other stuff I threw on here. I was talking about monitoring and observability. There's agent ops now. And then here's the LLM Llama agents, which just came out, I think, this week. And you can click on those links and get information on those. Agent's journey. This was just, some notes I had. I was excited about Crew AI. I was confused by AutoGen. I really like Praising because I had a better understanding. LangGraph, of course, Llama agents, and then, the homegrown agent code, which there's a couple of GitHubs out there where you don't even need any of this stuff. You can just build your own. And yeah, that's all
this
I
is
have.
great. Take us up a level to the non-technical bit here. What agents are real and happening? We're in the early markets, and there's a tremendous amount of fluidity in the different tools, but they're going to settle out. Or what's your headline after doing this research?
I think I wouldn't be putting them in production. The funny thing is that what I find, and this happens again and again, what I find is all this is automation. That's all it is. It's automation. And we've been doing automation for years. I mean, there's Zapier, where you can connect this to that and that to this. And so it feels like it's automation. The only difference is that we've always had like a human there to kick it off or to end it, right? You set it up and you trigger it, and that when it's done, it's done. with the agents, what we're finding is like, you know, sometimes if it can't get an answer, it will continually hit the API. You know, it'll come back, and it loops, you know. And that's when I saw my bill started to go up. Like in one day, I was sitting here at my desk. I was totally happy. I was like, wow, that's cool. That's great. You know, getting this stuff, it's happening. And then I looked at my account. So we need human in the loop. I wouldn't put it into production. There's many, many great minds working on this stuff, and they are crunching it. I mean, it seemed like there were like startups like popping up during the conference. I mean, it was, you know, the ideas were flowing. So yeah, I would play with it. I would you know, think of it as automation. Don't automatically think you need an agent. You may just need an LLM. And you might not even need that. You may be able to just do it with code and data.
Yep,
You know?
really helpful. Let's grab some questions. Go ahead, John, and then Lucinda. Great job, Raymond.
Thanks.
Yes, Raymond, one of the questions I had is how mature is the environment that these agents operate in? I mean, if you go back and you look at, you know, a lot of the Wall Street automatic trading and so forth is essentially agentic, right? You know, these parameters, you know, come into force. Here's the trade I put in, and you know, back in the you know, a couple of the crashes, you know, people couldn't get confirmation, so they just kept putting orders in, right? As you were just saying, like it just keeps hitting the request. How mature is the counterparty outside your organization? I mean, it's one thing to, you know, give agentic information and agency within a firm, but if I want to go send an agent out, shop for things, look for a deal, close a transaction, sounds like we're very early days.
We are very early days. Yeah, you know, like I said, it is. Bottom line, we're talking automation, and the capabilities are out there now where you can, you know, you can connect to, like I said, Zapier, and there's a whole bunch of other ones that I don't know if it's HubSpot or there's some other ones. And you can like, for example, I have an issue with like all the newsletters and email that I get. So I'm using Google Apps scripts where I can go in and I can trigger, and it will grab those, you know, based on subject or based by sender, and put it in a folder for me, so I don't have this, you know, 500 emails in the morning, and I can look at it, and that's automation. You know, I don't need an agent for that. But I do think it's there are some folks that at this point are, you know, running a lot of tasks in their life. You're supposed to pick the things that are simplest, the things that are, you know, one-offs, things that'll save you 5 minutes here, you know, 5 minutes there. That's what, you know, on a personal level, that's what you should focus on.
That's great. Let's keep driving. Go ahead, Lucinda, then JC and Alexander. Go ahead, Lucinda.
Yeah, just first of all, great presentation. I really appreciate that. I just saw it was either a comic or a comment that somebody said, like, if working with one LLM is like working with a shibboleth, then working with agents, you have to be a shibboleth wrangler. So yeah, totally early stage, etc. But really great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Just a quick question. You mentioned DSPy, and I've heard people talk about DSPy like, yeah, this is the right way to program with LLMs. How do you see DSPy for like working with agents?
Well, so if you look at the purpose of DSPy, right, it's kind of like a self-reflection, right? It's trying to regenerating its own prompt, you know, over to get to the best answer, the prompt for the best answer. So and this is something that's interesting to me as well, because there are these different methods of working with LLMs. I haven't figured out yet how to use that method and then wrap it with an agent framework. And I know it's possible. I haven't gotten there yet. I know that there's, you know, folks that are miles down the road already, you know, but that's what I'm thinking.
That's great. Go ahead, JC, and then Alexander, then we'll go to open mic.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Raymond. You know, great presentation. I guess my question is more from a pure business standpoint. Are we seeing productization of different use cases with agents, or are we still at the stage where people are experimenting, like lots of bespoke situations. I'm interested in sort of finding out if there's sort of use cases that are emerging with that technology.
Yes, yes, there are. And I, I wanted to present that today. There's it's, I'll have to ping it out to you, but there is a company that has, that now they're starting, there's more than one company now that are starting to release agents for specific tasks. And
Gotcha.
they're, for companies. So, it might even be something simple like agent AI. Let me see. Yeah. Yeah. So here you go. So these guys are already, they're saying sign up for free. You get a feature. You got a company research agent, competitor analysis, website domain valuation. And then they have, and so they're just busting these out. I don't know if they, if they're built on their own models.
JC, I'll let you go first. You try and come back and tell us.
Yeah,
it's-
no, sure.
it
This
says-
is good. Thank you.
Yeah, built with love and GPT-4.
Okay.
Oh, and the other, one of the things I got at the conference, someone said, do not use GPT 3.5. It's garbage, hot garbage, they said. Don't use it.
Great. Let's keep rolling. Alexander, then open mic, and we'll start with Lucinda. Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, great presentation, Raymond. I just wanted to also Agent AI is pretty good platform. Dharmesh from HubSpot is pretty much a juggernaut in the SaaS industry. So yeah, I definitely think it's going to be kind of a thing or a big thing here. But as far as a question for your presentation, like where do you think that the positions will be as far as these people that kind of like control all these different agents within a company? So maybe like let's say like 7 years down the line, do you think it's going to be more of a full stack developer role, or do you think that it's going to be something that's going to be completely different or new, or like kind of more of a DevOps role? Where do you think that's going to be going as far as like people that control the agents and make certain that they're actually operating their task on a consistent basis?
Right. There was a presentation on future roles. And if you look at how we work already, I mean, the industry said there's like a front end for the UI, there's a back end for the server, there's a DB database, and then there's like a DevOps, that handle the pipeline, CI. So there will be similar roles. I think that, like what's happening here with Agent AI, that's one person. So, or not one person, I'm sure it's not one person, but the idea is you get that mind share, right? People know, oh yeah, I can go here, then they're on the hook. There most likely is already going to be a similar situation, agents, but it'll be from Microsoft, or it'll be from Amazon, or it'll be from OpenAI. They've already started that, right? So as a business, I'm going to align myself with someone that I can count on being, right? This agent AI will have to really instill trust in organizations before he can count on folks, just automatically using his product. In terms of roles, I see I think quality assurance is going to be a key one. I think, if I'm a company and I'm using an LLM or I'm using an agent, agent framework, I'm going to want somebody in the company that has an understanding of them and is able to troubleshoot them. Because even now, folks are doing stuff with GPTs, and if you get an error, you don't know what to do, and you don't want to be in that situation. So there was discussion about that too. It was like, how can we make sure, it leans into that explainable AI, or how can we make sure that folks that are using this product have an understanding of something goes wrong, right? So I think QA is going to be important. I think an understanding of the pipeline is going to be important. I don't see like deep learning being that important. Even the deep learning engineers that I know, colleagues that I have, they're kind of like, they don't even want to do that stuff anymore. because they've seen the progress that we made, and it's like, man, you know, I used to spend, you know, a week, you know, with TensorFlow or whatever trying to train, and now it's just like you just go to one of these sites and you can just do it, you know, in a couple of hours. So I'm not sure that deep learning is going to be necessary, but there's going to have to be people that have an understanding and to be able to observe, monitor, and QA the systems.
Raymond, just absolutely fantastic.
you.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you.